All right, thank you for joining us for What Am I Even Doing? I am Tara Lilly and I have Bruce Bryan here with me. He is the owner of 5 Points Creative. He's also an author and a brand new radio host and podcaster. I'd love to get into it with you, Bruce. Thank you for joining me today.
Tara, thanks for having me on your show. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and let's start with where you are today. Where is Bruce Bryan? And then we can kind of take a step back on how you got here. So tell us about what you're doing and what your business is.
Sure. So, sort of as you alluded to, I think I have three or four businesses right now. Um, I started an advertising agency and marketing firm about almost 17 years ago, and we've been helping clients, well, really all over the country. Our new clients in 2025 were in Idaho, Colorado, Alabama, Tennessee. A lot of work in Virginia, where I'm based, and in the Southeast. We are really a little different type of firm. Many companies right now have really focused on certain niches, and we've leaned into the idea of being a generalist. And a friend of mine, somebody we both know, recommended the book Range to me probably a decade ago, maybe a little longer, and I read it, and it just really resonated with me. So we can talk more about that later, but that is really a part of 5 Points Creative is the name of the company. And again, we're based in Roanoke. We have people in Memphis, Richmond, and Charlotte as well. And then, as you said, I wrote my second book and published it late last year. It's called Turning Tables, Everything I Needed to Know About Business I Learned as a Server. And my goal with that was to really start to expand the public speaking work that I've done through the years. I've always enjoyed it, but I wanted to use the book as a way to kind of catapult that forward. And then, like you said, I started a radio show, which I had done about a decade ago and then set it to the side. And it's called Naturally Curious, wherever podcasts are available. And I talk to interesting people, kind of similar to what you're doing here. Not as quite as comfortable on the video side, so it's right now audio only, but it's on NPR regionally in Virginia, and of course wherever podcasts are. So all those different things kind of keep me going.
Wow. I mean, yeah, I don't even know when you make time to sleep. That's a lot. Um,
Well, I'm still a pretty good sleeper, but yeah, the other thing I'm really excited about that I should mention as well is chairman of the board of directors for Healing Strides of Virginia.
wow.
And they're going through a really fascinating time right now. It's equine assisted therapy, and they do a lot of work with veterans and kids that are on the autism spectrum and a lot of other folks. All of us have challenges, right? And so their audience is anyone. And they're, again, based in Virginia, but just a fascinating organization.
Oh, that's awesome. And I feel like you're a good example of an entrepreneur because most entrepreneurs have many passions and interests and a lot of times those come out at different seasons in life. You don't start out doing 500,000 different things. So if we back up to that 17 years ago before 5 Points was even where it is today, how did you take that first step of turning that your idea into business? Like where did you start of like I need to do this and I'm going to do this?
Well, the need to is really the answer. So if I could take everybody back to 2009, there was a thing happening called the Great Recession. And my career had been in broadcasting. I was the director of sales at a number of TV stations, mostly in the Midwest and then here in Virginia. And the same slowdown that hit me in Ohio in '07 hit me in Virginia in '09. And it sounds kind of trite to say we were setting sales records, but it's documented. My teams were setting sales records, but the owners of the TV station group had made the decision that they were going to cut management and they wanted me to get rid of one of my people. And I thought, no, he's doing a great job. And I gave them a great solution where we could basically hide this person, if you will, in another position until that slowdown passed and then bring them right back because they were really doing a wonderful job. And I didn't know that they had made the decision that they were going to eliminate a manager no matter what. So then they're like, yeah, you're right. He is doing a great job. You make more money than he does. You were brought to clean things up, brought in to clean things up. Things are clean. So in '09, I didn't have a job. And I'd made the decision I wanted to stay in Roanoke, and there were not many jobs available. I didn't have a lot of time, didn't have a big severance or anything like that. So It was really out of necessity, Tara. I'd love to say that it was this dreamy, esoteric thing that happened, but it was, I've got to do something to generate revenue, and this is the thing I know how to do. So I went from being a seller of marketing and advertising to basically a buyer of marketing and advertising. So I took what I learned and what the things that drove me crazy about that industry from a seller's perspective, and apply that wisdom to helping clients.
Wow. So that you had to make a big shift
It was
in your business in your life because of a business decision that happened at a company that, a lot of us work for other people and they make decisions and there's only so much you can control and do, right?
Yeah, and I think that was one of the things that was really challenging is I wouldn't have done it if I'd have had any other choice, but I didn't have another choice. And people say, "Oh, see, it worked out great." And that is true, but it's also really difficult, Tara,
Yeah.
because they don't know how hard it is when you first get started. I think that's the one thing I just want to encourage young entrepreneurs is it is hard. And anybody that says, "Oh, it's sunshine and butterflies," there are days that are like that, but it's really it's a challenge, and it's not for the faint of heart, right? You just got to kind of keep pushing forward.
So you had to do it out of a need. And when you decide, okay, this is what I'm going to do, this is how I'm not going to try to seek other employment right now, which I know that was a different time too, which was probably kind of similar to 2020 when a lot of people are facing layoffs and even today. So how did you approach it? Were you like, I'm going to create a plan, or you're like, I just have to do this? Because like you mentioned, you didn't have a big severance, so you're like, I just need to figure this out how I go or as I go.
Yeah, it was a lot of figuring it out as I go. And I say to my team all the time, there's nothing that we do now at 5 Points Creative, nothing that we do that we had ever done before. Every single thing that we do, we had to start. And so, at first I was really coaching businesses on media buying and media planning. And then somebody
Mm-hmm.
would say, "Hey, can you help me make a commercial?" Sure, I can do that. And I'd figure it out and do it. And I had done some of that in my television days or radio days, both. And then they'd say, "Can you help me make a website? Can you help me name my company? Can you help me?" And it was always, "Can you help me?" And that's how the company grew. And, I always joke that I'm a reluctant entrepreneur, but you said it yourself. Like once you've done it once, it does get easier to do. And you start to do more and more and try other things. So you're right on target with that. And I think when you talk to other entrepreneurs, you'll see that, even though I didn't know I was one, I think I always treated the companies I work for like I owned them, even though I never did own any of them. And so, yeah, it is really about trying new things.
And and a lot of that comes with like probably measuring how you say yes and no to some stuff, right? Like you were saying, if they asked me, I'm like, yeah, we could try it. But there's probably sometimes you're like, I don't want to go down that path, right? That's
Yeah,
not where I want to go.
that's a great point. And I know you pretty well, and I know you well enough to know you've done a great job figuring out what you want to do and what you don't want to do. I think that there have been times I could have been better at that. I think one of the reasons I've learned I don't really want to do that is from doing things and then realizing, that isn't really what I love to do. And then I try to find other people that can do those things competently and make those introductions. And one of the things it's on my social media. I'm a connector of people, so I hear things that people need, and then I hear people that need things, and then eventually try to connect them.
Yeah,
So,
that's one thing that I have known about you, and we've known each other for many years, is you have such a large network, but it's an active network. You are actively working it. I can't even remember the amount of times over the years where you mentioned I'm going to go have coffee with this person or have a lunch or have a dinner. So when you first started, like you mentioned coaching and getting your clients, how valuable was your network in those early days?
yeah, so I was new in town in Roanoke, and I had been in town about a year and a half. So I didn't have a ton of connections. I did have the gravitas of working at a affiliated television station because most people recognize the affiliation, and so I knew that. But I guess I do have kind of a wild story that plays into it. The morning that I was let go, every quarter I was at the TV station, they would have a head count cut and a percentage. Hey, we're going to cut 2% from the budget and one person, or two
Mm.
people and 4%, or one person and 6%. And each time I'd ask my boss, hey, am I okay? And he'd say, oh, yeah, you're fine. Am I okay? Oh, yeah, you're fine. And then one time I said, am I okay? And he went, and that's when I knew, hey, that was on a Thursday. Monday morning, I had a meeting with a group of Roanoke leaders called the Creative Connectors. It was Richard Florida's placemaking group, and they had been, Richard Florida's group had been brought into Roanoke, and we were going around the room, and my friend Betsy Whitney, who I had known at the time and still know very well, was standing right next to me. She said, I'm Betsy Whitney with Habitat for Humanity, and I'm looking forward to meeting everybody. And then it was my turn, and everybody had gone around and said who they were, and I said, I'm Bruce Bryan, and until about 30 minutes ago, I was the director of sales at this TV station, and now I'm not sure what I'm going to do, but this is the best room to be in. And it really was. I didn't break down, if you will, until later that day.
Mhm.
But in that room was the future mayor, the future vice president of communications at the healthcare system in town, and a couple friends that I consider dear friends to this day. So I was glad I kind of muscled up and went into that room, even though it was kind of embarrassing to have just been let go. And it's hard to explain, hey, we're setting records, but you don't have a job anymore. So,
Wow. I mean, so you, in that moment, that's a big decision of being vulnerable and being human, which I
yeah.
think is a huge part in just being able to put yourself out there. Here's where I'm at. Here's where you can help, or here's how I can help you. But that can be, like you were saying, like that's embarrassing. That can be really difficult to do, is to be so vulnerable,
It
right?
it is, and I will tell you, Tara, I believe in authenticity. And
Mhm.
when we look at one of the things that our team talks about is building brand trust. And I think you're familiar. You were mentioning about where we are right now. We work with a major regional financial institution called Ridgeview Bank, and it's taken off and it's going great. And they've got 3 locations in a couple of years, and they've really checked marked every box that they had set out to do 4.5 years ago, and they're going forward. But one of the main reasons is the brand is authentic and it matches the leader, Kerry McConnell, the president of the bank, right? And so authenticity is really important, and it's really difficult to fake, right?
Oh yeah. And well, like you said, like that's I'm sure that's how you've been able to grow your company too, is you've had to been the face of it for many, many, many years. Now you have a bigger team. So take me through, okay, you started out as coaching, now 5 Points has a big team. The services you offer are way different than what you did day one or even month one. So what strategies or decisions did you take me through that were like, looking back, you're like, these were big ones when I knew I had to, if I was going to shift my business to adapt to how things were moving, if I wanted to grow, these are the things that I needed to do. Those are like some key milestones over the years you knew that you had to make a switch.
Absolutely. It's a great question, Tara. So, one was I had 4 clients when I started, and two of them were through people I knew, and two were
Mhm.
people that I had a casual acquaintance with, if you
Okay.
will. And they were enough to get me started, not enough to sustain. So I knew
Hmm.
I had to grow. Well, one of those clients was a regional medical practice called Vistar Eye Center, and Beth Kolnock and I worked together for a couple of years. And she said to me, I might be interested in coming to work for you. And it was kind of scary because she was the full-time director of marketing for Vistar Eye Center, and the plan was for her to come over to my company, which at the time was called B2C Enterprises, was to come over to B2C and work with me and bring Vistar's work with her, so that that would fund me being able to hire her as my first real significant full-time employee. And I knew that she had expertise in account management, and I realized early on that there's a book that a friend of mine told me about called The E Myth, which talks about basically an entrepreneur has every job in the company, and the smart entrepreneurs get themselves out of the jobs they're not very good at, right? And so there isn't a job at 5 Points Great I haven't done, but that doesn't mean I was great at doing all of them. And so Beth became a person who could manage the account relationships, which would allow me to go focus on building that networking base and expanding the company. And it was scary because it took me longer to get to the place where it's like, okay, Beth, let's do this. And it's kind of a funny story, but she nudged me a little bit because she was ready to make that move. And I was like, we're doing what? Because if Vistar had opted not to come with us, and I had Beth's salary, I was like, how am I going to do this? But once that happened, then we had more capacity. And then I realized, okay, we need to add a design person. And then when that happened, we added a couple production people. And, so that's how it grew. It grew very organically initially, very organically. Then kind of a crazy story. Beth and I worked together for probably 6 years and maybe a little longer. And then she went to work in corporate America in corporate marketing and was very successful and doing a big job up and down the East Coast in senior living, and made the decision that was a lot of travel and a lot of hardship and difficulty. And she reapproached me last year about coming back to work at 5 Points Creative. And I've told her this to her face, and I've told other people. So there's no breaking news here, Tara, but sorry. But I said, if I could line up every person I'd have ever worked with at 5 Points Creative, we rebranded in 2020, and I could bring one person back, Beth, you'd be the person that I would bring back. And the fact that she is back has really, been a lot of fuel in the last year or so, and it's really situating us for whatever's next, right? But yeah, each step, Tara, was organic, and yet you learn as an entrepreneur and you start to build systems and you start to let go and let other people build systems, and all that together helps you be intentional.
Which is so important as a leader, like to delegate and the trust, right? So that even like the place where you started hiring your first employee to now you have a big team, like by you saying like we did it organically, it wasn't like out of the gate I'm going to hire 5 people because I already know that's what I'm going to do, because that could have put, like you said, your business in a place of risk where now you have high expenses and you don't have the revenue yet to meet those salaries. So then you have debt and a lot of stuff is now out of balance, right?
That's right. That's right. And the reality is that most of the time, my wife was in HR for a long time, in HR
Okay.
sales. And so we talk a lot about most companies, it's not a straight line of adding people and growing at the same time. There are times I added people before I had the clients, and there's times I had the clients before I added the people. But I always, and I encourage my leaders to be interviewing people and talking to people, because there have been times where you have to be ready to add a person. And there are other times where I meet with somebody just to help them or make an acquaintance. And then I think, oh my goodness, this person would be perfect for this other thing. One of those, 10 years ago, I started a nonprofit music venue, and it's called the Spot on Kirk. And I'm a month into not being on the board of directors. And it's off and running on its own now, which I think is a really cool. I learned that lesson from Ed Walker, who's a major entrepreneur in the Roanoke area, is, build it and then give it to people who can take it further. Well, my first employee for the Spot on Kirk was halftime with the Spot on Kirk and halftime with B2C Enterprises as a public relations and expert and writer. And so Jamie Miller, came in to launch the music venue and to do a lot of our communications work. And you're right, you have to evolve the company. And so one of the things, being intentional is important. So I realized in the late teens that the company was my monogram, Bruce Coleman Bryan. It's right there on the thing, B2C. And I realized if I were going to have value for this, that I really needed to expand it. And so we came up with 5 Points Creative for two reasons. We're at a 5 Points intersection in a neighborhood in Roanoke, Virginia called Old Southwest. But also it's the 5 ways we help companies. So marketing, advertising, digital, branding, and communications. And that was all on purpose, right? So it has definitely expanded and changed, but you have to be evolving. We're coaching probably upwards of 50 businesses, and one of the things that I see is trying to help lead them to what's next is really important.
Oh yeah, like that's so important about the adapting, and even rebranding can be scary, which I'm sure you've ran into with multiple clients where you're like, hey, it's things have changed, or you have a different client now, because just as generations grow up and move into different roles in businesses, there has to be the ability to adapt. And it's so important for business to not be scared of always challenging themselves, right? Internally, asking those questions: why are we doing it this way? Well, is this still work? Why? Just going back to why? And I wanted to kind of dive into right now. We mentioned all the stuff you're doing. You're leading the agency. You're an author. You have a podcast, radio show, part of Healing Strides, and even before that, you had the music venue. How in the world do you prioritize and focus, especially now? Okay, just take us through, like, how did you decide I want to write a book, and how did you make time to do that, and also do the radio show and the podcast and everything else?
Yeah, that's a really fair question. And I, a couple weeks ago, got a little bit burdened by that same question because I was feeling a little bit behind. So what's happening is I feel like I'm caught up in this area and in this area, but I'm treading water here and I'm not treading water over here. And so I started compartmentalizing the things that I do. So for me, Mondays, I don't work in the office, which is why I'm in my home
Okay.
office today, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it helps me have space to write, to work on the speaking, to work on the business startup, line up my guests for the radio show, all that stuff. I have different to-do lists, and that helps me also. But I don't want to sit here and tell you I've mastered it either, Tara. If we're going to be authentic, I have to tell you I'm working through that. And so I asked a friend of mine who similarly situated, who has 3 or 4 different things he does, and he gave me a couple tips, and that was good. And I think people have to find what works for themselves, right? And so what works for me may not work for other people. I find I write better in the morning, so a lot of times I'll get up and write. I made the decision. Well, so the book sprung from a talk that I gave in 2015, Everything I Needed to Know About Business I Learned as a Waiter. That was the talk. And I realized I still had the Prezi that from way back when. So I printed it up and gave it to my son, Dan, who's a partner at the ad agency, who was a server at Granite City restaurants and I think Abuelos, which was a Mexican restaurant chain for a while. And he added some thoughts and notes. And this was about 2 years ago. And then The Bear won all those awards, and the book is about hospitality and food service. And I was like, this is a hot subject. I just started, it was tough research, Tara, but somebody had to go to the bars and the restaurants. And my wife, Laurel, and I did it for we
Oh,
did it
yeah.
for the team. It was grueling, but yeah, but it was the outline. And then I'm not going to say the book wrote itself, but the pieces really did fit together. And it was my second book. The first one I wrote in about 3 months during COVID. It was a real kind of like a press. There was a lot of empty space and a lot of anxiety. And so I wrote that book called 40 West back then. This one was a little bit more calculated and, let the veil down on the curtain a little bit and just say, I wanted to build subject matter expertise and to give a platform to do more speaking. And I thought, well, owner of an ad agency, that's interesting, but author, of an international best-selling book, that's a lot more compelling. And I was intentional with the radio show and the book, so those pieces would come together. The timing didn't work exactly like I thought, but the pieces have all come together. So yeah, that's how it fits together. And I try really hard, although there are times I'm anxious about one of the things that aren't going as well. But I try to kind of stay focused where I am on what I need to do at that time and then do the next thing. It's in the book, actually. It talks about reprioritization and the need to shift your priorities, triage as you get more information, right? So
Yeah.
try to practice that principle on a regular basis. No, I just was going to say it is frightening sometimes. So what I always say is I keep my head down working and my eyes up looking for opportunity. But
Yeah, it's like your head's on a pivot, right?
a
Just
little bit.
you have to be. I think it I was gonna say, it was interesting how, like, 2015 you did that presentation, and then you got inspired by The Bear. The For people who don't know, which I'm sure everybody does, is a series on Hulu about the chef in the restaurant. They won some awards. That's that resurfaced that presentation and that topic. And then that's when you wrote the book, was many years later, right? It was an idea, and it was a concept that maybe wasn't right at the time, 10 or so years ago. So even revisiting something, and when you have the team in place, because I'm sure a lot of that had to do with it, is you now have leadership in place at the agency that you can delegate to, and you've opened up that bandwidth by taking Mondays as the Bruce day, to think, to do the other projects you're passionate about, to have that bandwidth. But all that had to
The,
come together, right?
yeah, the pieces had to fit together. It's a really, really poignant remark you make, Tara, because I think one of the things that happens is I thought it would be a good book, but I didn't know how to write a book. And so when I wrote the other book, then I was like, okay, well, I did this once. I don't want to do it the same way. I want to do it a little differently this time. And so I asked people, including you, like other business people that you know, what did they do? And so there's so many times we think we have to invent things when really we can replicate what other people do. And so the idea, I thought during the teens, hey, this would be a good book, but I didn't do anything about it. It just kind of rattled around in my brain. And you're right, I was not in the right place to do it. When I got to the right place, I bared down and powered through it. And yeah, so just like you said, the timing has to be right. And that isn't always the case. Timing isn't always right. So it's fun to have a bunch of different possibilities back there.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned replicating it, and I think like there's a lot of people say there's nothing that's been already, you know, new under the sun. Like most things have already been created or tried or whatever. But there's still that element of when you were saying like you could replicate it, but still adding your own touch to it
That's right.
or adapting it for what fits for you or your business or your goal or what you're passionate about. Like it's never just taking something somebody else did and copying it because it's not going to always work for you, right? It's not always going to work for a business or your clients. It's okay, here are the guiding principles, here are best practices, here are things that we know have worked really well for other businesses, but let's adapt that for where you are. And I think that leads into I want to talk to you about competition. Competitors, because I'm sure you hear it from clients all the time. I do as well. I mean, it's hard to not be looking over your shoulder. What are they
Right.
doing now? So tell me about how have you handled competition in the agency world? Because there's a lot of agencies, and you've been able to expand outside of Southwest Virginia, which is huge, to be able to go to other states. How have you handled it, especially ones that have bigger budgets?
Yeah, so we've positioned ourselves that we're not a small one person, two-person company, and we're not an enormous 300-person company. So we're big enough that we can take care of just about any project. I mean, we've made award-winning documentary films, so we can do big projects. But I think what's frustrating is a lot of businesses in our industry, a lot of businesses hire an attorney, then do what the attorney says. Hire an accountant, do what the accountant says. Hire a marketing person and think I can do it myself. And so, people can do it themselves, and there's nothing that stops anybody from doing it themselves, but it's just not always the best idea, right? And so we have a lot of competition in that I forget sometimes we're very loyal to our clients. And what I've seen over really in the last 3 or 4 years in particular is, between AI, which is probably a whole separate conversation, and everybody fashions themselves a marketer. The tried and true principles really stand up, but people don't want to necessarily put in the work to stick with the tried and true principles. So what I've learned is what works best for me is to work with people that want to work with us. Because if people want to work with us, we can help them. If they don't want to work with us, Tara, it almost never works because they're looking for reasons why it won't work. And so what's interesting about this is a very personal business because we are consulting and coaching. And Beth, who I talked about earlier, her title is marketing therapist, and I love that title. They get to pick any title they want. Hers is marketing therapist, and it's a great one because we end up being therapists sometimes, right? But it is discouraging sometimes because there are companies that fashion themselves as experts in, well, we lost a company we were doing some work for a porta potty company, believe it or not. And there's an agency out west that only works with porta john companies. And I was like, okay, well, if you realize there's a company that only does porta potty marketing, and I'm putting it in air quotes, because what I've learned back to that, where we started with that idea of the generalist in the book range, is the principles that drive a plumbing company and a car dealership, and I hate to say it, but even a medical practice, the principles are very consistent. The message is different, the needs of the recipient of whatever it is you're doing is different, But the process of taking people through that and what needs to happen for things to be successful for a nonprofit, a business, a medical practice, they genuinely, I promise you, really are very similar. So we think we can learn things from the architecture firm and apply them to a building company. We can take things from a nonprofit and apply them to a legal practice. But there's a lot of competition out there. There's companies way bigger than us that say they can do it better, and there's companies smaller than us that say we can be more personal service. So what we try to do is have authentic relationships with our clients and look out for them as best we can, and try to make yourself sticky so that you're doing more than one thing for somebody. Because if you're doing one thing, it's easy to let you go. If you're doing six things, there's a little bit more pain. Last thing is, I've been reading a lot. Credit to Drew McClellan. He coaches agencies called Agency Management Institute. And in our world, he says people are looking for the safe choice. They want to know, can this company take me from where I am to where I want to go? Have they done it before? Am I going to be safe putting my trust in them? And that's something I've been talking to my team a lot about.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, like you mentioned, applying different principles and, from dealerships to medical practices, in the day, like we are humans helping other humans, right? B2C, B2B, patients, clients, customers, whatever you call them, in the day, it's still about helping and serving other humans. So being able to have that trust and deliver that value, which goes back to building really good relationships and saying what you're going to do and being honest about that and being transparent. Like, these are the things we do really well. The things that we're not a good fit for you is this, and we would recommend you
Somebody
go.
else.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is huge. And I think that, like you hitting on that, is a lot of businesses get so distracted by having to oversell and overpromise, like do the dog and pony show because they want to win that client or customer. But then when it gets passed off to the internal team from the sales team or business development team, then you have a mess on your hands because they can't deliver what was oversold, right? So then that trust goes down, the bad reviews go up. It's now you're creating a really bad brand for not only your customers and clients, but now prospects are going to start seeing that. So, yeah, I think you hitting on there's always going to be competition, right? But how you show up is important.
I remember John Wooden is a famous basketball coach, and his book, They Call Me Coach, is, 70, 60 years old now, probably. But the principles are amazing. And what he used to say, probably the all-time winningest college basketball coach, and he used to say, I don't really scout the competition. If we do the things that we're supposed to do and we execute the things that we're supposed to execute, we're going to be fine.
Yeah.
And they can't stop us. And I was like, dang, that is really impressive. Well, I'm not saying we've done that and never lost a client. We've done that and still lost clients. But the odds are much better that people aren't going to take phone calls because they're confident and comfortable working with the team. And yet, just in the last week or two, I've had a conversation with somebody that said, well, this isn't what you said it was going to happen. It was a client. And I went back and looked at my notes from August and July when the sales process was happening. And I had written all the notes and said exactly the same things then that I had said to them last week. And they were frustrated because they didn't like what I had to say. But there's a difference between not liking what a consultant or a helper or a coach has to say and saying, well, you didn't tell me this. Because I looked at my notes and I'd said it repeatedly over and over again. And so even when you do things right, it still can backfire. So, more about competition, just to kind of wrap your question, long answer to the short question is we have to always be doing business development because our average relationship is 6 years long. And that's great. And I wish they were longer. I think about the clients that don't work with us anymore that I know we could help and I know we would have helped, but we have to always be talking to new clients because somebody else is always coming in talking to the clients that we're talking to. And you hopefully build a wall of service around some of those people. But things change and people change and circumstances change, which goes back to what your point was about talking to entrepreneurs.
Yeah, that top of funnel awareness, that's like always be working that, right? Top of funnel brand awareness, always, 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 always have that on. Even when times get hard, don't turn it off. Even if you're like, you want to cut your budget, That has got to always be working because there's always going to be competition, and you have to keep, like you mentioned, that pipeline. You got to keep it active because otherwise you're going to be scrambling if you turn it off, and that's not good. That's going to cause way
Yeah,
more problems.
don't turn it off. And at 5 Points, we're in marketing. We're helping other companies in B2B and B2C marketing, but we try to make ourselves our own best clients. I mean, we've pushed really hard. We have 4 ebooks that are out that's gated content. We are doing a blog each month. We don't do as much as you do, but we do a lot.
Hmm.
And it's really hard to be, the old saying about the cobbler who has the kids with no shoes or the painter with the unpainted house.
Oh, yeah.
So people in marketing, you have to apply the same things that you're telling other people to do. And I see that a lot where it is really hard. You want to just say, oh, I don't have time to do that. But you don't have time to not do that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's shift to something a little fun. I want to hear about the weirdest or funniest thing that's happened in your business right now. You probably could pull a million things, right? But
Yeah.
just gives like, you
Quick
know,
story.
yeah, it's a roller coaster. So tell us about one of those roller
Well,
coaster rides.
so there was a game changing client meeting that we had. And it was at our office, and it was early morning. And I remember I got there at like 5 in the morning, and or 5:30. It was in the summer, so the sun was kind of coming up, and I was like, okay, this is our day. We're going to make this. We go through the presentation. It goes great. You feel the connection. Everything feels wonderful. And you don't know because it's you and another company. It's competitive, just, like you were talking about earlier. At the end of the meeting, the prospective client says, do you have a restroom I can use? And I said, sure, it's all the way in the back on the left, which is true. But what I didn't let the person know was before the main bathroom, this is where we're in an older house. Our office agency's in an older house, 1913. And right before the main bathroom, there's a washroom that has just a commode, and it's under the stairs, and that's it. Well, they walk back and they use that one. I'm like, oh, and they were coming in from another state. And I thought, oh my gosh, they're going to think we don't have, a sink and running water. And so after that, one of our employees got a door sign that said emergency bathroom with. So I had told them the truth, but the bathroom was all the way on the left, but they shortcut one door short. And I was aghast. I was embarrassed. And I was like, there's a sink right there.
Oh my God.
That might not have been what you were expecting, but it was a pretty funny story.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you're like, that's like client experience, and that's not what we wanted them to have as an odd bathroom experience in our old. Well, your office is like a renovated house. It's not
Yeah,
like,
it looks new.
yeah,
It looks brand new, but
yeah.
the bathroom fortunately was all fixed up. It looks great. I'll send you a picture sometime just so you can see.
It's, hey, it's better than you having a porta potty there from a porta potty client. Like,
That's
test
right,
this out. At least you weren't doing
man.
that.
And after you broke up with us, we'd have had to get rid of that porta john too. We'd have sent it packing.
Well, I want to finish up my interview with you. It's been really great talking to you.
Thanks
Let's
for having me.
do a quick fire round. Does that sound good to you?
Let's
All
do it,
right,
Tara.
let's go. All right, sweet or savory?
Both, which is why I weigh what I do. But if I had the choice, I'd probably say savory.
All right, early bird or night owl, which I think you already answered.
Early bird.
Or,
I wrote 40 West between 4 and 7 in the morning,
oh,
and
wow.
and my wife Laura would hear me. Yeah, I'm a pretty aggressive typer. She could hear me typing away. She's like, "What is that?" So I had to move upstairs.
4 a.m. That's early to get started
It's
on.
just
That's a lot of brain power too,
it,
that
it does
early.
help. But Tara, let me tell you what. If entrepreneurs are watching this, they probably either stay up late because they can't sleep because they're stressed, or wake up early because they can't sleep because they're
Yeah.
stressed. And that's, I try to go back to sleep, but I don't always succeed.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
So it wasn't, it was not necessarily intentional, but it was like, oh, well, I'm up. I might as well get
Yeah,
going.
might as well. Brain's already spinning.
Yeah.
All right, one business tool you can't live without.
Now it's my phone. It's my
Okay.
phone. I mean, I just like everything's on there. We have Slack on there, obviously. But yeah,
Okay.
definitely my phone.
And what's the best piece of advice you've ever received? Well, I don't know, it's a big question, though, but
That is a big question. My dad told me, and that first book, 40 West, was about my brother and my trip across the
Okay.
country to honor our late father. And my dad said, make your avocation your vocation and you'll never really
Mm,
work. And I can tell you, I love every person I worked for or with, but I've loved every job that I've had for 40 some years now. And I loved what I've done. So yeah, make sure it's something you love doing.
yeah, that's good advice.
Thanks,
And last question. If you could have dinner with anyone in history, that's another big question, who would it be?
Wow. Well, this is probably okay. So I would like if it was like a big, famous, incredibly famous person. I'm related to George Washington, so I'd love to sit down with that guy and pick his brain, right? Like he's like a cousin, like 8 generations ago through marriage. Martha Ball, his wife, was we're in the Ball family. But the person I think that I would really enjoy sitting and just having a conversation with is Eric Larson, and he's a writer. And here's
Oh,
why. He
yes.
writes the most amazing books. I don't know how he does it, but what's so
Yes.
cool about his books are they're historical fiction or
Mm-hmm.
nonfiction, historical nonfiction. But inside the quotes are things that he researched, that he found, letters and interviews and things like that. But then outside of that, he sets the stage. And I don't know how he tells stories like he does, but the reason he'd be interesting is because he's written like a dozen books about different people. So I could ask him about
Mm-hmm.
Churchill. I could ask him about Lincoln. I could
Yes.
ask him about, sorry, but about Hitler and about
Mm-hmm.
what was happening. That book blew me away in the Garden of the Beasts about the
Mm-hmm.
American ambassador to Germany in the 1930s as the Nazis were coming to power. And like what this guy had no idea what he was walking into. And I just would love to pick Eric Larson's brain. That guy
Oh,
just,
yeah.
how does he do what he does? Just blows me away.
Yes, I agree. He's one of my favorite authors. The first book I read was Devil in the White City, and that
Oh,
hooked me. It,
how is that not a movie,
I
right?
don't, right? That's what I'm saying. And
Same. First book I read.
I love that. I love how many books you mentioned throughout our conversation. So I'm going to add them to the description below so people can go and check out the books that you mentioned throughout our conversation, especially Eric Larson and links to your books, your two books,
Thank
40
you.
West and Turning Tables. Bruce, thank you so much for your time today. This was awesome. I enjoyed talking with you and just learning more about what am I even doing?
What am I even doing? I stare at the mirror a lot, Tara Lily, and ask myself the same question. But the answer is the next thing.
There you go. There you go. That's a great answer. Thank you so much,
Thank
Bruce.
you.
And I will have all the links below for you guys for what Bruce's agency, his books, check out his podcast and his radio show. And I'll see you on the next episode.